Depending on who you ask, it's considered either an internet revolution or the greatest financial pyramid scheme in human history. I'm talking about the world of cryptocurrencies and its related phenomena, NFTs, blockchains, and Web3. Our world is sharply divided between the onslaught of advertising campaigns and celebrity endorsements, staggering numbers and headlines, and grand declarations about the potential and bright future of this technology. Never before have we seemed so close to the financial prosperity painted by crypto enthusiasts. But is it really as promising as it seems? Today, I'll tell you how it really works and why the rich keep getting richer while you are left with nothing, counting your meager dollars in a worn-out wallet. The main question of today's video is cryptocurrency the greatest scam in human history, or is it the godsend capable of solving all the economic problems of our society? In 2009, a Norwegian student named Christopher Koch came across a document online that talked about a new digital currency, Bitcoin. Out of curiosity, Christopher bought 5,000 coins for $25. Then he forgot about them for a full 4 years. 4 years later, he saw the news that Bitcoin had skyrocketed by several thousand%, and his $25 had turned into $800,000. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, another man named James Howells remembered that he had 7,500 Bitcoins stored on a hard drive he had mined years earlier. When he went looking for it, he realized he had accidentally thrown it away during a cleaning spree, and now it lay buried in a landfill. Today, that hard drive is still somewhere underground, and the Bitcoins on it are worth several $100 million. There are hundreds, maybe even thousands of such stories. In some cases, yesterday's students became dollar millionaires, while others, chasing easy money, lose all their savings in just a few days and end up drowning in debt. Then there are those who simply forget their passwords and can no longer access their wealth. Perhaps some of the people in these stories knew something in advance. But what exactly are cryptocurrencies? Are they just a massive financial bubble, or the future we'll be living in tomorrow?
I suggest you take $1 frickin' dollar. $1.
At the dawn of the cryptocurrency era, this man was the first entrusted with bringing knowledge to the masses. He became one of many who would later contribute to the popularization of Bitcoin, a small pawn on the chessboard of a game played by figures who prefer to remain in the shadows. Yes, he was entrusted with this knowledge from the very beginning. But for what purpose? Was it all part of a grand plan? A mistake? The start of a new era? Today, you'll learn it all, and we'll start at the very beginning, so you can trace the entire journey from the start. This is what New York looked like in September 2008. From a building in the heart of Manhattan, people in expensive suits walked out one after another, carrying boxes in their hands. These people had just been laid off from the world's largest bank, Lehman Brothers. That morning, no one yet knew that these layoffs would mark the beginning of the deepest economic crisis on the planet since the Great Depression. More than 2 million people in the United States would lose their jobs. Over time, the crisis would spread to other countries closely tied to the U.S. economy. Eventually, it would engulf the entire world. The result of this crisis would be the loss of tens of trillions of dollars by governments worldwide. But why did this happen? The problem was that for many years, banks were issuing mortgage loans to virtually everyone. The These loans were then bundled into securities, and banks made billions speculating on them. But in the end, it was the banks themselves that bore the brunt of the collapse. Many institutions with century-long histories found themselves on the verge of bankruptcy. At this point, government stepped in to protect assets critical to the economy. And the biggest question was, where did the government find money in the midst of a global crisis? Part of it came from taxes, and part of it was simply printed. The issuance of new banknotes devalued people's savings, and inflation surged to 9%. Essentially, the banks first earned massive profits and then were bailed out at the expense of taxpayers. Here lies the first problem of the global financial system. Money is monopolistically printed by the government, but stored and managed by banks. How can this be solved? Perhaps by creating a currency that doesn't depend on either banks or governments. Sounds almost unbelievable. It was in 2008, in the midst of a global crisis spreading like wildfire, that an anonymous internet user named Satoshi Nakamoto released a document titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. For most people, even today, it sounds like some sort of incantation. But back then, in that now distant 2008, the first stage of a global plan that would change the world began. To help you understand it better, let me explain the essence of this technology in simple terms. For example, one person transfers 10 coins to another. Later, that second person returns 5 coins to the first. In total, we have 2 transactions. To ensure that neither participant can claim in the future that they didn't receive any coins, the transaction data is stored by both parties. Furthermore, when they want to make another transaction in the future, information about the previous deal will be encrypted into a block. This block will be assigned a unique code called a hash. All new transactions will be recorded in a new block, which will contain the hash of the previous block. Once the block is full, it will also be encrypted, and the entire list of transactions will form a chain of blocks, blockchain. Simply put, every new transaction carries information about all previous ones. This makes the entire chain secure and ensures users don't have to worry about the safety of their funds. But what's so revolutionary about this? It's simple. If someone tries to tamper with the record in one of the blocks, the entire chain will be disrupted because the hash of each block not only reflects the set of all transactions, but is also linked to the hashes of other blocks. Such an action would immediately be noticed by other participants in the system, as they all store copies of the entire blockchain. And there can be thousands of such participants, just as there can be thousands of transactions in a block. So altering the data across participants simultaneously becomes virtually impossible. This is the missing piece of the puzzle that previously made it impossible to keep all financial transactions in check. The inability to maintain full control was what caused errors, which in turn led to the collapse of economic cycles. So, blockchain is essentially a kind of ledger that stores information about all transactions. However, this ledger isn't kept in a bank. It's stored by all participants in the system. But what does this have to do with cryptocurrency? The thing is, cryptocurrency operates on blockchain technology. To create a new block and record transaction information in it, the hash of that block must be found, but the hash is unknown in advance. All that is known is that the hash must consist of 64 characters. To find the correct hash, participants in the network must try countless combinations. In other words, solve a complex computational problem. This process of solving the problem is the essence of Bitcoin mining. The participants in the system who search for new blocks are called miners. When a miner finds the correct hash for a new block, they share it with other participants, who then verify the hash and all the transactions within the block. If everything checks out, the new block is added to each participant's version of the blockchain. As a reward, the miner receives Bitcoin. It was this document explaining the system that Satoshi Nakamoto shared with everyone deeply involved in cryptography at the time. To test and refine the new system, people and their drive to create were needed. Enthusiasts who became the system's first users unwittingly helped improve it and eventually allowed it to fulfill its purpose in the future. And so, on January 3rd, 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto created the first block in the Bitcoin blockchain. This block contained no transactions. It held only a single phrase, "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." This phrase was the headline of the British newspaper The Times on that day, symbolizing the deep financial crisis the world was facing. And on January 12, 2009, Satoshi made the first ever Bitcoin transaction. In block 170, he sent 10 Bitcoins to programmer Hal Finney. Over time, more and more people visited the Bitcoin website, learning about the technology, and became miners. It's hard to imagine now, but at the time, Bitcoin was worth less than a cent. Back then, it wasn't used as a currency, but was merely an obscure technology for testing the system. However, the technology gradually gained recognition. By 2010, an American programmer posted a historic message on a Bitcoin forum. He promised to transfer 10,000 Bitcoins to anyone who would order him 2 pizzas. A fool, you might say. But at the time, he had tens of thousands of Bitcoins at his disposal. Perhaps the real fool in this story isn't him. Could people in 2010 have imagined that those 2 pizzas would one day be worth a fortune, and that a simple forum post would be seen by millions? Of course, some could, but not everyone. Only those at the forefront of bringing blockchain technology to the masses truly understood its potential. Such a simple act, buying pizza with a new type of currency, eventually turned into a butterfly effect. Today, millions of people around the world commemorate this event every year on May 22nd, celebrating Bitcoin Pizza Day. Doesn't this strike you as peculiar? Almost like a carefully crafted marketing strategy designed to remind everyone of missed opportunities year after year. However, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take a step back and talk about why the new blockchain technology, and Bitcoin in particular, has become so popular in recent years. Why is it no longer surprising when Bitcoin reaches a price of $100,000? And how is it that entire countries are now adopting it as their official currency? The entire history of humanity is the history of exchange. After all, to buy something, you need to sell something, which means exchanging one thing for another. And the thing that was exchanged most often became money. In the early days of human civilization, practical items such as livestock and animal skin served as money, and sometimes large stones were even used as currency. But over time, people realized that commodity money was inconvenient, and something more universal was needed. This is when precious metals and coins made from them started being used as money. However, as the global economy grew and developed rapidly, metals became increasingly impractical. They were difficult to transport, hard to mine, and challenging to control in terms of issuance, and simply not enough to fund governments and wars between them. By the 18th century, Europe transitioned to the paper money we are familiar with today. The first paper money was backed by gold and silver, so there was no complete abandonment of precious metals. The amount of money in circulation was limited by how much gold and silver it could buy. For the next 200 years, the world economy operated on paper money, Dollars, pounds, euros, francs. All of these filled the vaults of the world's largest banks. However, after World War II, 3/4 of the world's gold reserves accumulated in the United States, and the US dollar became the world's primary currency, as it was essentially the only one backed by gold, while all other currencies were pegged to it. This Bretton Woods system lasted until 1971, when the United States unilaterally decided to abandon this rule.
Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States. Now,
The reason for this was that by that point, the United States had printed so many dollars that no amount of gold would have been sufficient to back them. So, what are the dollars backed by after the gold standard was abandoned? The answer is nothing. Beyond the guarantee of the government and the trust of the people, money has no intrinsic value. Today, the value of the dollar, just like any other fiat currency, comes from the belief that it can be used for exchange. The more people use a particular currency, the more reliable and stable it becomes. However, this financial system has a few key characteristics. First, fiat money is controlled by the government, which regularly prints more of it, devaluing your savings. Second, economic transactions are carried out through banks, but banks can lose depositors' money for 100 different reasons. In other words, the primary means of exchange we use today doesn't belong to us. We don't control it, and we can't influence its purchasing power. Meanwhile, Bitcoin, which we began this video with, belongs only to you. To make a transaction with it, you don't need a bank or any other intermediary. All you need to transfer Bitcoin is the recipient's wallet address and access to the internet. With Bitcoin, you can only lose your money if you provide the wrong address for the transfer, or if you give access to your wallet to third parties. And here's an important point. The creator of Bitcoin set a limit on the total number of Bitcoins that can be mined. Only 21 million coins. This will help prevent unlimited issuance, a practice governments often indulge in under the guise of controlling inflation. Thanks to this mechanism of limited issuance, Bitcoin, unlike fiat money, does not depreciate. There is no unlimited influx of coins that could lead to a decrease in value. That's why Bitcoin is called digital gold. In essence, this is true. There is a limited amount of gold on our planet. It's impossible to mine more than this amount. The extraction of gold, like the mining of new Bitcoin blocks, becomes increasingly difficult, which is why the price of both assets rise. It turns out that if any money is a medium of exchange, it's no surprise that Bitcoin, which requires only energy to support mining, is becoming increasingly popular. People have finally believed that this new technology will give them control over their money. And the more people mined Bitcoin, the more they trusted it. However, Bitcoin's transaction capacity is very limited. It can process only 7 transactions per second. For comparison, the Visa network processes 24,000 transactions per second. This slow speed is necessary for the stability of Bitcoin's operation, but it also hampers its mass adoption. Once the blockchain technology became understood and popular, thousands of programmers worldwide began thinking about ways to make Bitcoin faster. In 2011, the mechanism was already in motion, and the locomotive for the new technology was about to hit the tracks to realize the ideas of its creators. A former employee of Google created a cryptocurrency that operates 8 times faster than Bitcoin if it were simply cheaper. While Bitcoin is recognized as digital gold, the new coin, Litecoin, became the digital equivalent of silver. But Litecoin was not the only alternative to Bitcoin. For example, in 2012, a cryptocurrency called Ripple emerged. Unlike the traditional banking transfer system, SWIFT, Ripple can transfer client funds not in several days, but in just a few seconds and virtually for free. After 2012, the number of different coins and projects continued to grow. But the real revolution in the crypto world came from a young guy named Vitalik Buterin in 2015. He thought about what would happen if you took this new technology and used it to solve a key economic problem, the problem of trust. To address this issue, the Ethereum project was launched, which, at its core, introduced the concept of smart contracts. How does it work? And why is Ethereum currently the second largest cryptocurrency by market capitalization out of thousands of others? Let's say you want to buy an apartment. To protect yourself, you go to a bank and place your funds under the protection of the banking system so that the seller can only receive the money once the purchase agreement is signed. The bank oversees the process and takes a commission on its service, but the smart contract technology from Ethereum allows you to remove the bank from this transaction. The system itself verifies the contract's conditions, and once they are met, transfers the money from one wallet to another. Fast, cheap, and reliable. The idea behind Ethereum was simple, yet brilliant. As a result, even at the stage of releasing its coin, Vitalik Buterin's team raised $18 million, and the price of Ethereum has risen by 10,000% since its launch. With the advent of smart contracts, the decentralized finance market emerged as a consequence of this technology. People began creating platforms where one could anonymously exchange one cryptocurrency for another, obtain loans in cryptocurrency, or deposit it to earn interest, all without the involvement of banks. Essentially, everything that Bitcoin was originally created for became possible thanks to Ethereum. Thanks to Ethereum, it became much easier to create new cryptocurrencies. There was no longer a need to develop a blockchain from scratch. In fact, Ethereum became a programming language on which anyone could create their own coin for the blockchain network. This proved incredibly useful for new young companies, as they could raise capital by issuing their own coins in the market without government control or the need to work with banks. And this was a significant step for the entire young industry. Wherever there is an opportunity to do something without control, there will always be a large number of crafty and enterprising individuals who prioritize personal enrichment. To make $1 million, they are ready to invest $100,000 in PR. If you gather all this money into one big pile, you get a marketing campaign that even Coca-Cola would envy, a brand known in every corner of the globe. It seems like yet another savvy step in increasing blockchain's popularity by taking advantage of people's naivete and their uncontrollable desire for quick wealth. The cryptocurrency industry of 2016-2018 resembled the internet of the late 90s, when everyone understood that the future belonged to the internet, and companies related to it were multiplying exponentially. All of this became possible thanks to the smart contract technology and ICO. The idea behind ICO is very simple. You come up with a project, issue your own coin for it, promise investors that this coin will skyrocket by 1,000%, and raise funds by selling them tokens. It seems like an extremely simple scheme, where scammers can acquire assets and ultimately not launch the project, leaving the coin's value at zero. Here, it's important to understand that there are projects behind which, as with ICOs, you find both scammers and genuine people with real products. For example, Ethereum raised $18 million through its ICO, and provided its investors with returns in the tens of thousands of %. However, most ICOs are nothing more than empty shells, with the sole goal being the enrichment of the individuals leading the companies that launched them. You must have heard the story of Jordan Belfort, the infamous Wolf of Wall Street, who sold shares of unknown companies for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, ICOs, in most cases, are an equivalent of his activities. The majority of the companies launching ICOs will not only fail to provide their investors with profits, but might not even make it to the market launch. But if it seems crazy to you to buy coins for a project that doesn't even exist yet, what would you say about buying pictures on the internet for tens of thousands of dollars?
$69.3 million at Christie's is the first ever sale by a major auction house of art that, well, doesn't exist in physical form.
On February 16, 2021, the auction house Christie's sold a painting by American artist Mike Winkelmann under the pseudonym Beeple for $69 million. The painting was titled Every Days, the First 5,000 Days. Essentially, it was a collection of 5,000 images the artist had created daily for almost 14 years. And so what? After all, Christie's had sold even more expensive works of art, like Salvator Mundi by Leonardo da Vinci for $450 million in November 2017, or the 1976 triptych Francis Bacon for $86 million in May 2008. But the painting didn't exist in a physical form. Only its digital version existed. So what was actually sold? It was an NFT, a unique token in the blockchain that confirms the ownership of a particular asset. To put it simply, if there are millions of Ethereum and Bitcoin coins, each with the same value, an NFT can be compared to a piece of art. For example, the famous Mona Lisa by Da Vinci is one of a kind and resides in the Louvre. Yes, you can make copies of that painting, but only at the Louvre will you pay for the right to see the original. And an NFT confirms that you own the original item, with this information stored in the blockchain. After the purchase of the Beeple painting, the NFT boom began. And what's most interesting is that these weren't purchases of incredible works of art, but mostly memes. The more news surfaced about pictures being sold for tens of thousands of dollars, the more people appeared who wanted to buy them to resell for an even higher price. The most famous collection became the one consisting of 10,000 unique FNTs depicting bored monkeys. This story is purely about business. The creators of the project enlisted celebrities to promote these FNTs. Justin Bieber, Paris Hilton, Post Malone, and other famous personalities bought these monkeys and shared their purchases on their social media accounts. And here it is, marketing in its cleanest form. To bring people into a new industry, you can always use opinion leaders, whose main task is to manage the minds of the masses. Each of the endless list of celebrities finds themselves on top only to perform one simple task: to implant the necessary idea in your head at the right moment, which you will then follow. As a result of this grand marketing, a huge bubble inflated. Cat gifs, characters from mobile games, random pictures, all of these were bought and sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. The frenzy was reminiscent of the tulip mania of the 17th century. But instead of flowers, there were digital images that anyone could copy. The bubble deflated as quickly as it grew. Trading volume dropped by 97%, and many NFTs lost their value. It turned out that many of those promoting NFTs were simply pushing their own products to sell them for as much as possible during the hype. Even those who started the NFT saga such as the ones who bought Beeple artwork for $69 million, did it solely to draw attention to their own coin, which after March 2021 lost almost all its value. But all these ICOs and NFTs are just dust compared to how smarter people are making money with crypto. In 2010, two organizations emerged that were unlike anything before. These organizations created platforms where users could trade cryptocurrencies. Today, there are more than 40 such platforms. The emergence of cryptocurrency exchanges made working with cryptocurrencies much easier. Now there was no need to constantly transfer money from one wallet to another. However, cryptocurrencies were initially about independence and anonymity, and an exchange is a centralizer that collects your personal data and holds your funds on its accounts. So, has a bank appeared in the world of digital assets? And when you look at the entire blockchain technology and its history of development, it becomes clear that this step is simply a natural part of a larger plan. Give people hope, give them the ability to own their own money, and they will eagerly embrace it. But who said that, in the end, their money truly belongs to them? After all, it's foolish to just hand over money to people. They simply don't know how to use it. It's no secret that 1% of the population controls 90% of all possible assets. This is how control over people is maintained. Here's an example. There was a cryptocurrency exchange called FTX, one of the largest on the planet. It quickly attracted investors because it offered the opportunity to trade any kind of crypto assets and actively cooperated with all regulators. But in the middle of 2022, information leaked to the media that FTX was holding most of its assets in its own tokens, FTT, which it also printed itself. The head of the exchange, Sam Bankman-Fried, was using client funds for personal purposes. When people started withdrawing their funds in mass from the exchange, FTX froze their accounts in response. As a result, both the exchange clients and the holders of its tokens lost their money. The total losses amounted to around $10 billion. Even those within the system who understand how it works, and most importantly, why it exists, are not always able to resist temptation and fall prey to it. And temptation always leads to failure. This is not the only example of a major cryptocurrency exchange collapse. Why does this happen? Exchanges not only take fees from transactions, but also make use of their clients' funds. Given that the regulation of cryptocurrency processes is not fully controlled by governments, exchanges face a strong temptation to use their clients' assets for personal gain. And if at the beginning of the video I told you that blockchain technology is a new, secure, and different system from the traditional banking system, it now seems that this technology is just like a bank, but with even easier chances of losing your money. Things are much more complicated than they might seem at first glance. For example, in 2001, the country of El Salvador abandoned its local currency in favor of the US dollar. Why? Officially, this was done to attract investments and stabilize the economy. But here's the problem. The dollar is controlled by the US government. This means that now, currency operations within one country are controlled by another. Even for those who don't understand finance, this should seem strange, as El Salvador is now directly dependent on the US. This continued for 20 years, until on June 9, 2021, the president of El Salvador announced that Bitcoin would become the country's new official currency. It seemed like everything would be simple and the economy would be safe, as no one controls Bitcoin. But is that really the case? Approximately 67% of all available Bitcoins are stored on just 0.5% of wallets. This means that 0.5% of people control 67% of all Bitcoins. At any moment, we could crash the price if we wanted to. Yes, part of these coins is stored in the wallets of crypto exchanges, which holds the funds of private investors. But we all remember FTX, right? Why should you trust a secure exchange but not a secure bank? The idea behind cryptocurrency was originally meant to separate from the state. At least, this idea was long and persistently developed in people's minds using all available tools. To make someone do what is needed, they were simply given hope for the concept of a world they had long dreamed of. And what is the outcome? Those at the origins gain everything, while ordinary people are left to simply follow their plan and mourn the money lost on FTX. The state also plays its role perfectly in this game. After all, the idea of separating money from power will never receive proper approval in the eyes of political figures. The state, as an independent system, actively hinders the development of cryptocurrency. Bans, cancellations, restrictions, all of this only strengthens the idea in the eyes of the average person. They want to control me, but I won't allow it, is what the average person thinks. Their desire to be independent, and most importantly, protected from encroachments on their property, pushes them to take a simple step, buying cryptocurrency, money that will truly belong to them. But as you hopefully understand by now, in the end, the money ends up exactly where it was destined to be back in 2009, on the blockchain, a system that has taken over the world.